All 8 billion of us are doing metabolism at all times. This show is about learning what metabolism is, how it affects you in every way possible, from mood and mental state to performance and energy. We are all about fine tuning the human experience for you to achieve the best self you can be. And if you are someone who loves science, curious to know how your body works and how to optimize it, then you are in the right place. This is the HVMN podcast. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the HVMN podcast. And I'm your host, Dr. Lat Mansour, a PhD in physiology, anatomy, and genetics, and the research lead of Health via Modern Nutrition. And if you enjoyed this episode, go ahead and leave a review. And if you have any question, leave us a comment. And as always, we appreciate it if you can share it with a friend. Now, without further ado, let's get into this episode of HVMN Podcast. Hello, everyone. Today's guest is Jay Ferruggia, who is a fitness industry OG who has helped people get jacked and strong since 1994. As the founder of Renegade Strength and Conditioning, he started one of the original underground warehouse-style gyms where he trained countless high school, college, and pro athletes. He's been featured in every fitness magazine there is and wrote the Heart Gainer column for 10 years in Men's Fitness. He's an advisor to WWE, MLB, and NFL athletes, as well as organizations such as Salesforce, Livestrong, Onnit, and Schwarzenegger. For the last 10 years, he's hosted the Renegade Strength Show, where he discusses all things fitness related. In this episode, we talked about hypertrophy training for different body types, recovery strategies, nutrition, as well as having the right mindset to be disciplined and motivated. So stay tuned and enjoy. We have Jason Ferruggia here. Thank you very much for being on Health via Modern Nutrition podcast. Welcome.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it.
So I was just recently on your podcast on the Renegade Strength Show. It was a great conversation. We talked a lot about ketones, and quite a lot of customers actually referred when they bought Ketone IQ, they referred to your podcast and your the episode we had. So thank you for that.
Nice. Yeah.
So today the role reversed, and I get the privilege to interview the OG, person who has been in the fitness industry for such a long time and such a prominent figure. And with all your knowledge and expertise, I can't wait to pick your brain and try and connect the science that I've learned versus in real life practicability, coming from your experience. So for our listeners and for our viewers, could you tell us what your background is and your story behind it?
Yeah, sure. So I grew up, typical skin. Well, first I was fat, then I was skinny fat, and I was always just insecure, socially awkward, shy. Grew up in the 80s watching superheroes and watching pro wrestling every Saturday morning, and I kind of wanted to be like one of these guys, right? So I got into training in the mid to late 80s, and we didn't have any of the information and the science that we had today, so I just kind of had to figure it out as you go, and it took a while. Like I graduated high school, same height I am now, 6 feet tall, at 147 pounds, and I started training in like 7th or 8th grade, so it was a lot of wasted time. And I have horrible genetics for it, so I had to learn everything. So in college, I got obsessed with back then, there was no internet, but you could order books from the back of like Iron Man magazine and stuff. You could order some old books and things like that, and VHS courses. Then I started interning in the weight room, switched my major, started training people, just learned everything I could, however I could. I would go intern places, hire different strength coaches that were crushing. So then I got really sick in college. I got tuberculosis, actually. I almost died. Actually, if I didn't go to the doctor that day, my lungs would have filled up with fluid and I would have died. Yeah, it was crazy. So I had to be off for a semester. I had to go home and be on bed rest and take like 30 pills for a year, made all my hair fall out, turned my pee fire engine red. But during that time, all I did was just study. Like I got everything I could. Got a bunch of certifications and things like that. And that summer I started training clients, and then I never looked back. I don't even know how, because I didn't even know what I was doing, and I knew nothing about business. But it just took off, and by the end of that summer, I was on a pace to make 6 figures at like 19. So it was like, this is insane. So what I did was then I moved back home, transferred to a school close to home, and I was going to school and just training people all day. And but by the time I was 21, the first 2 years I trained people, I didn't have a place. I was able to invest that money and rent what went on to become literally underground, because it was in the basement, like one of the original like underground warehouse kind of style gyms back then. Um, and then that was the next 15 years, just there 12 hours a day, coaching people all day, every day. It was normal people all morning, and then after school from like 2:45 till 7, it was athletes. And then a lot of those guys went on to play college and play pro, and that was just my life. That was the early days.
I can truly relate starting training late as well, because I was overweight all my life until I was in my second year in my undergraduate when I was 22, and then I started exercising and training, not because I actually wanted to lose weight or wanted to get healthy. I was coaxed into going jogging with a housemate of mine, and then at the age of 22, I couldn't even jog more than like a kilometer, and I felt really, really embarrassed. And then I was like, you know what? At least I want to be able to go for a jog with her and not die halfway through. And then that led to me doing it every day, and then led to me joining a gym. Like you said, one thing led to another, and then I got more motivated as I see the results, and it's like discovering parts of my body I've never seen for my entire life. So that was quite an experience. Now, when you started training, were you doing it with an aspiration of being a trainer, like your career path, or was that just for yourself, and then you somehow started the training career?
Yeah, the latter. So it was just for me, like, again, being this insecure, overweight kid, and then being skinny. I was like, man, I don't like this life. I don't want to be this guy. So my cousin, Christine, actually she lived 3 houses down the street from me, and she started dating a professional wrestler in 1988. So it was like all of a sudden that guy, like this dude was like 6'4", 250. Like I got to see that in person every day. It was crazy. And so he kind of gave me a plan, which in retrospect was horrible. It was the wrong thing, the last thing I should have been doing. But then I just got obsessed with it, right? So like, and I think if I had great genetics and it came easy, then maybe I wouldn't have done this for a career. But it was so hard, and it was such a struggle. And I would go to the gym with other kids, and they were making progress, and I was getting nowhere. So I was like, man, I really got to figure this out. So that was why I kind of just got immersed in studying more. And then when you have a breakthrough, right? You're like, oh, this is great. Now I figured it out. And then eventually I just wanted to help more people. And I kind of also regretted, like, I wish I was doing this earlier. I could have been a better athlete. I could have had a better experience in school.
But hey, things happen for a reason, and you're doing the right thing at the right time all the time. And it's really true, like seeing is believing, right? Like you said, you see a person who is that fit, who is always in shape, like it gives you the realm of possibility. It gives you the hope that you can be that, and it's really truly powerful. And I feel that whenever I when I moved to the US for the first time to do my master's in New York, and everyone in New York was in shape, and then suddenly I felt that, okay, this is a common thing, it's a norm, and it's possible for me to achieve fitness even though I was overweight all my life. So that was really powerful, a powerful motivator for me. Now, you have moved to so many different places. Do you feel, just in US alone, the different cities have got different culture when it comes to mindset in fitness? Are there certain cities like New York, for example, because they're so full of like Broadway dancers and models and all of this, so they are like generally fitter and have a better mindset for fitness versus places that don't? Does that make a difference for US in your experience?
Yeah, I think so. So I lived in Jersey for most of my life, and it doesn't have like a good fitness culture, but there's a stereotypical like Jersey meathead. Like if you're Italian, you're from Jersey, and you grew up like going out in clubs and stuff, like you tried to get jacked. That was the thing. I lived in New York for a bit, and for me, it didn't seem like a big, like, I don't know, that comparatively to when it wasn't that big as when I moved to LA. Like LA, Santa Monica is the birthplace of physical culture, the original outside Muscle Beach and all that. So like LA, we lived on the beach, and you would just see every day, 365 days a year, people are outside swinging kettlebells and doing push-ups and playing beach volleyball and tennis and surfing and this and that. So that's a huge fitness culture. Then we lived in Austin for a bit, And Austin has a great fitness culture now too.
And biohacking.
Yeah, big time, big time. I would say that's probably possibly the best place right now. Now we're in Miami, and it's definitely a fitness culture here just due to the weather, and Miami's kind of all about looks and whatnot. So like I would pick Austin as the best place for that.
So you talk a lot about, hypertrophy and sort of your content and all of that. Does it make any difference in terms of exercise regime and training regime when it comes to endomorph, people who are naturally bigger size and harder to lose weight, versus people who are ectomorph, people who are naturally lean and hard to put on weight? When you train them, do you give them separate, or different type of training program, or is it the same?
It's pretty similar. I mean, you could definitely make arguments, right? That like, certain people, certain genetic types have lower recovery ability. They can't handle. They don't. Their work capacity isn't great. There's so many different ways you can classify it, right? Like ectomorph, endomorph, a type A kind of guy like myself, who generally is an ectomorph anyway, just because you're like cortisol, adrenaline dribbling, you're like wired, You could look at personality types, and if you're more dopamine dominant, and like there's all these things where it can kind of get overwhelming and confusing, where I like to just simplify it like, okay, let's go with what we know works for the majority of people, and then we can kind of, customize it a little bit based on how you're responding to that. But I see why it gets overwhelming, because again, you can classify it so many different ways. In general, most people, I give them, we can get more into the details of it, but as long as you're doing a sound program and you can personally recover from it. Like my thing is, do the least amount necessary to achieve the desired result. Like based on your genetics, that might be, a very small amount, or based on your stubborn genetics, that might be a very large amount. But we may, for example, say like, okay, Bill, you need a lot of work. You have a high work capacity, but you have low recovery ability. So we need to spread that work out over 5 days in shorter doses, where this guy might be able to do 3 days of longer workouts. It's like, that's where it gets a little complex and confusing. But I think for the majority of people, you can kind of, simplify it into one kind of system.
Okay, that's good to know, because if you go online and search for, online training programs, there are millions of them now, and you get all different types. You get high volume, you get high weights, you get higher rest periods, lower rest periods, you get high intensity training. So it gets overwhelming, as you said. And I am here, having such an expert in front of me. I'm trying to resist and resist the urge of using you as my personal consultant right here for the sake of my audience, because I am an endomorph. It was, growing up overweight, it was easy to put on weight. It's really hard for me to get lean, and I always have to factor in the cardio portion of my training. I really notice the difference when I do cardio. It doesn't matter if it's high intensity or steady state, low intensity, as long as it's there, the leanness of the muscle would definitely improved. And I hear people say all the time, you just have to lift heavy, lift often, right? And I want to hear your thoughts around high frequency. Like I recently just finished a German volume training, right? So 10 times 10 sets of X exercise of like leg press or bench press, or squats or whatnot, versus 5 to 8 reps of a set, 3 sets, 3 to 5 sets, and really push heavy and have like 3 to 4 minutes rest. What are your thoughts on the two different modules here?
I would go with the latter for the majority of people as a starting point. So yeah, 5 to 8 reps, longer rest periods, 2 to 3 minute rest. Let's say 8 to 10 total work sets per body part per week. That's a starting point for everybody. Like back to your previous question, when I kind of summed it up, like that's what I would. Now, would that be full body? Would that be upper lower? Would that be push pull legs? That depends maybe on a few different factors, how fast you recover, what you actually personally enjoy, which a lot of people will be like, oh, I'll just go with what the science says or what this guy says. But if you don't enjoy it, you're not going to do it. Like some people just hate full body workouts. Some people hate splits. So you have to factor that in too. But yeah, 5 to 8 long rest periods. And I'm going to put progressive overload in quotes because yes, you have to get stronger, but better form and execution is the first form of progressive overload. So I might have someone, now this is going to sound crazy, but if I take someone who's been training for at least 2-3 years, and most of my guys have been training for 5 years plus, so in that case, 90% of the time, I'm going to lower their weights by 20 to 40%.
Wow.
And it's a bit of an ego check, but I'm going to say, hey, here, do me a favor, do this, this, and this, and do that press again. They're like, oh, wow, it's the first time I haven't felt my shoulder in like 7 years. I'm like, okay, well, then that's worth the trade-off of lowering the weight. And over the next 8 to 12 weeks, we'll bring that weight back up. But with this new form, you're going to get better results. Your chest is going to be stimulated more, and you're going to have less shoulder pain. So I always want not only the least amount of volume, but the least load. Like, yes, lift heavy. I've been saying that since, 1994. I was one of the first guys to always say the answer to everything in life is just lift heavier. But heavy is relative. Heavy with great form, where if you're trying to train your quads, we don't feel your hips, your back, and your knees feeling like they're going to explode every time. You just feel your quads. Now, that might be 30 to 50% than you put on last week. But you're like, oh, I actually felt my quads. Okay. So, you have to be honest with yourself. Like, are you just ego lifting and it's just, okay, I'm going to put the weight on the bar and it's whatever the fuck I have to use to get it up, or it's, oh, I'm actually training my quads. So be honest with yourselves. Is it an ego thing? Is it the post on Instagram? Oh, I put 4 plates on the bar. Yeah, great, but your quads haven't grown in 2 years. You know what I mean? So, like, we have to be honest with what our goals actually are. Then I reduce the weight, get you really connecting, develop a mind-muscle connection, reduce the amount of reps because there's less chance for, fatigue causing the rep to break down. So, like, let's say you never trained before. I'm going to get you in. You get to about 6, 7, 8. I'm going to go, that's good. You're going to go, wait, I could do 15. I'm like, yeah, you could, but it doesn't matter because there's more chance that the rep's going to break down as we fatigue. So let's take 2 minutes. Let's go back. Let's do it again. Let's add a little bit more weight. Let's slowly ramp up. And so again, when I say progressive overload is in quotes, it's, progressive overload form. Now once the form is locked in, okay, each week we'll add a little bit of weight. But people get into this, and I pushed this for years. People get into, you have to beat the logbook every week. No, you don't. That's how you get injured. Like, that's not how life works. There's no other physical endeavor that you can get better linearly.
Especially if you are just doing once per week. You can't expect it to immediately recover and adapt and be able to lift a heavier weight the following week.
Yeah, exactly. So, and sometimes people are like, oh, but that's how Dorian Yates did it. That's how so many people do it. And I get it. Yes. Like, yeah. But if you're a normal person with stress and a job and not optimal sleep, like, you just get to a point where you have to listen to your body. So if you did, let's say, 135 pounds for 6 last week, no matter what, you got to get 7 this week. And no matter what, you got to get 8 next week. And then you're going to go put 140 on for 6. And then keep doing, like, stuff just starts snapping. Stuff starts breaking, right? And you're like, oh, why does my elbow kill? Because the body doesn't work that way. It takes time to adapt. So it's not a failed workout if you didn't go up. It's like, you got to look at it like if you invested in a stock, it wouldn't just go straight up forever. It would go up, it would go down, it would plateau, up, dip, like, and that's just how the body works. Like, if I started playing golf today and I shot a 130, I don't shoot a 120 next week and a 110 the next week and 100, and I'm on the PGA Tour by summer, you know what I mean? But we think that in the gym, so like you got to listen to your body and avoid getting injured and avoid burning yourself out. So if you can kind of just push each workout at like 85% to 90% instead of always going 100%, because again, like, the person who can string up 12 weeks, 12 months, 5 years worth of training without always being injured is going to make way more gains than the person who's like, oh, I'll put 30 pounds on my squat in a month. Yeah, okay, and then you're injured for the next 3 months.
I feel the pain right now because of the GVT. I was doing 10 times 10 leg press on 450 and 1 minute rest in between. And then sure enough, my knee gave up. And it wasn't a serious injury, but I still had to take 2 to 3 weeks off. And that really affected both my training. The strength didn't get affected that much because, you don't lose muscles that fast, right? But what got affected was the mentality, the mindset, the motivation. It really took a shot. And only recently, I think last week, I managed to go back, 5 times a week and just do really low. Like, my squats went from 225 to 135 for 10 10 reps. So I'm like, you know what? I have to keep it in check. I have to prioritize my joints before I prioritize my ego.
Yeah, you got to listen to your body.
You were saying, lower the weight, focus on the form, and then over the course of 6 to 8 weeks, get back to the weight that you were doing, but then, with proper form. Now, when you get to that point and then you increase weight, when do you change your training program? Some people say 3 months, some people say 6 months, some people say you got to shock your body. There are a lot of memes out on TikTok and on Instagram where they jump on a lat pull down and start working on legs, like shock your body and not let your body know what you're working on. So what are your thoughts on that?
I think you need consistency. There's no hard rule. So there's not a lot of great exercise. Like if we go from head to toe, there's not a lot of great exercises where alignment's good, joint stacking's good, the resistance profile of the exercise good, it fits you, it feels good, and it has a lot of room for improvement. Like a press has more room for improvement than a lateral raise. It's really hard to go up on a lateral raise. So those are good exercises. So let's say we have, maybe there's 5 that are really good for each person from head to toe. I think you should stick with those the majority of the time. Maybe make just slight changes in how you do them. But again, if you're not obsessively pushing beat the logbook, if you're listening to your body, you're being smart, you get better at those exercises. Some people will say, well, Olympic weightlifting is a skill or powerlifting is a skill. Yeah, but doing a lateral raise and a proper curl is a skill too if you want to do it well and if you actually want to get something out of it. So treat it as a skill, work at it, keep the same stuff in there. I mean, and the thing about changing all the time too is you'll always be sore. It's always something new to learn, so you don't get anywhere, and you'll actually be more fatigued because your brain is like, oh, I got to learn a new skill. Like if you go do like an easy martial art or something, or just something easy that's physically not exhausting, and you're trying to learn it, you're pouring sweat. It's really hard on your body. So in a weird way that people wouldn't even consider, it contributes to more fatigue. So do the same things repeatedly. And then if you're like, hey man, I've been doing this variation of a press for this X amount of weeks or months and it's going nowhere and now it's actually starting to hurt my shoulder, okay, definitely swap it out. And maybe it could be a slight change, like you're doing a flat dumbbell press, do a 10-degree incline or a 10-degree decline. Or just play with something, a slightly different machine or something like that. So not crazy variation, like keep the same weekly schedule that works for you, same kind of reps. Like I don't think, for me, I said 5 to 8 ideal, but I would say like 5 to 10 is a sweet spot for most people. And then, so you don't need to be like, oh, month 1, I'm doing sets of 5. And then, okay, I'm burnt out on sets of 5. Now I'm doing sets of 15. Now I'm burnt out on sets of 15. I'm doing sets of 20. Like you can stick in that 5 to 10 rep range most of the time. The only way I would say don't do that, and just to backtrack a sec, what accumulates, what we know from research is what accumulates more fatigue is shorter rest periods and higher reps. So if you do lower reps and higher rest periods, you accumulate less fatigue.
But that's a good point. So you have lower rest periods, so you increase fatigue. But does that actually increase, because that you're maintaining high heart rate at all times, right? So does that contribute towards people who are trying to lose weight to really bump up the thermogenesis in the body and burn off the fat?
No, not in my opinion. It does nothing.
Good.
I don't think it does anything. Yeah.
So it just basically makes you more tired.
Yeah, exactly. I don't think it does anything to contribute to fat loss. And I used to try it a million different ways back in the 80s and 90s and early 2000s on clients, on myself. I just don't see it doing anything. And I've gotten ripped, and I've gotten so many people ripped resting 2 to 3 minutes, not going more than 8 to 10 reps.
And less injuries, I assume?
Less injuries, for sure, yeah. What I was going to say about the higher reps, that's where I lost my train of thought for a sec, was I will take some guys, so there's not a hard rule, like you can't go above 10. If you've been training for 20 years, shoulders banged up, you're jacked, you're strong, and you're like, this is the least amount of weight I can do on this, and it's 12 reps, or the heaviest, like it's 12 reps, well, yeah, we might have to do 12. Like you let your age, your chronological age, your training age, your strength, and your joint health determine the amount of reps. So just because I said 5 to 8 or 5 to 10 is great, you might be really strong in advance. You have to do 15 on this to be able to function, not get injured, right? So, but that's the extreme example. That's that's like maybe 5-10% of people. Most people will stay in that lower rep range.
That's good advice to have. And what I also found in my experience is that whenever I double check on my form and my form is not correct, because sometimes when you train alone, it's difficult, right? And you start adding weight and you're like, oh, great, I'm getting stronger, I'm looking bigger, I'm looking more lean, whatever, that sort of goal. And then to a point you're like, actually, you know what, I'm gonna lower the weight and see how low I can go on the squats, how low I can go on the bench press. And then you realize, oh shit, like I have been doing it for the 2 months, and even though heavier weight, I was doing it wrong. And what I do realize is, even though I lower the weight, my result is still progressing from where I lower the weight, rather than it going back and start gaining fat, which is very interesting. So tell me a little bit on the science behind that.
Well, so you're getting a new stimulus, number one, and then a lot of people just, it's almost a cliche at this point, but full range of motion. A lot of people don't use full range of motion, so you're going to get better growth with full range of motion. Now, for a lot of muscles, let's say lats or chest, well, not even chest, but lats, most people will get a full stretch on their lats, right? Most people will on their biceps, but a lot of people don't on their quads. You don't get it. So you want to train each muscle through fully lengthened, mid-range, and fully shortened position. Most people don't do that because they go to the gym and they just squat, and they squat to parallel, which is not a fully lengthened quad. So for most people with their mobility, a fully lengthened quad is only possible on either you put your feet on wedges, like a 10 or 15 degree wedge, you decide, check your ego, lighten the weight, and you go all the way down. Now we got a fully lengthened quad. So now all of a sudden you're using way less weight, but your quads are getting the stimulus that I talked about, and you're staying straight up, or as straight as you can, versus that powerlifting squat where you're bent over. So now, you're putting tension on the muscle, like you're saying. So now you're actually going to grow. Bench, a lot of people, that's not a full, especially if you're doing a powerlifting bench, right? You got this huge arch, and the goal is to shorten the range just so you can put on the most weight. So you're not getting a fully lengthened pec there. Whereas if you check your ego, you're like, hey, let me use dumbbells and actually go down and stretch. Now all of a sudden, you're getting a stimulus that you weren't getting before. So it's a new stimulus. It's that fully lengthened position. So, that could be what's happening a lot of times there.
Now let's talk a little bit about squats, right? We know squats is super good exercise because it's one of the biggest muscles in the body, and it does send a lot of signals to the hypothalamus for growth hormone, for testosterone, and all of that. So all that good thing that happened during recovery also come from the stimulus that you give during squat. A lot of people are concerned about the butt wink when they go into you talked about mobility and flexibility. There are mixed information what I found about the wink when you go down low enough, and then your pelvic your pelvis sort of like tilt forward. Is that a bad thing? Is that not a bad thing? Should you be worried about it? What can you do about it to increase flexibility and stuff like that?
Yes. So my thing is longevity first.
Okay.
Health, longevity. I want training to be safe as it could be. So I don't think it's a good thing. Now, if you're just trying to hoist up as much weight as possible, then fine, it doesn't matter. But eventually, it will matter to you. So a couple things about that is, first, if you sit back, again, if you do more of a powerlifting squat, you're just trying to use a lot of weight. So the first thing you do is hinge at the hip and go back. And you're already in that posterior pelvic tilt, or like that stripper arch, which a lot of people used to teach. Back in the days, everyone taught, just get this huge arch in your lower back and sit back. And then that yanks on your hamstrings, and that butt wink becomes even worse. And you might not feel it if you're in your 20s, 30s, or whatever, but when you get to your 40s, you're gonna wish you didn't do it. So what I teach is stand up straight, make sure that your rib cage is stacked over your pelvis, make sure your abs are braced, make sure you're pushing out and expanding 360 degrees around, so you're creating a real stable trunk. But I want your spine neutral. I don't want that arch. I don't want that arch on anything. So I'll always get rid of that arch, right? So now we go completely neutral, and I will teach, depending on what your goal is and your anatomy, maybe strongly driving the knees forward and then sitting down, or maybe driving the knees forward and sitting down at the same time. I don't teach sitting back unless you're just trying to build your glutes on a squat, in which case I would say the squat's okay, maybe it's like the third or fourth best exercise. I'd rather have you doing some other stuff to build your glutes. So yeah, that's my take on it. But most people can eliminate it just by tweaking their form a bit and having the ability to check their ego. And you're like, hey, you're gonna have to use less weight for a while. And then of course a lot of it, so many people will be like, oh, it's my hamstrings, it's my lower back, it's this, it's that.
Right.
It's your ankle mobility. So many of the times, because you can fix it like that if you stand on wedges. So what I have most people do is, hey, let's get on a really dedicated program to ankle mobility. I think ankle mobility is a game changer. It improves everything. Like if you have knee pain, hip pain, low back pain, and in a weird way, even shoulder pain sometimes, ankle mobility can change all that. So everyone, like if you're just going on a walk right now, listen to this. Like just stop and stand and just turn your foot side to side. Or when you come to a curb and you're waiting for a red light, hang off and stretch your Achilles. And if you can sit on kneel down and sit your butt on your heels and then just lift your knees off the ground. So you're kind of stretching like the top of your foot there. And then just you're sitting on the couch, cross your legs, do the alphabet. Like all day work on ankle mobility, and it improves rather fast. And you'll just notice, like it's like anything, you don't really notice, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh wait, my squat is so much better. It's like, yeah, it finally paid off. 3 weeks, 6 weeks, whatever it is. So I would highly recommend people do ankle mobility. But like that's going to do way more than stretching your hamstrings. Stretching your hamstrings does nothing to improve your squat depth.
I get to interview all these doctors, scientists, and cool people in this health and fitness industry, all made possible because of this podcast that is funded by the company I work for, which is Health via Modern Nutrition, or HVMN. And it is not that they pay me to do this, but I genuinely love and believe in the product Ketone IQ. I use it every day before my podcast, before my workout, or even after my workout for recovery. There hasn't been a single supplement that can give me such a drastic change in subjective feel within minutes as much as Ketone IQ has. For those of you who do not know me, I'm from Malaysia, I got my PhD from the UK, and my passion is in science and chronic diseases. And I believe it is all about transparency, scientific integrity, and about sharing with everyone so that everyone can benefit from it. And if you like this content and our work, please do support us by liking, leaving a review, or sharing with your friends and families, or even buying a shot of Ketone IQ at any Sprouts nationwide in the US, and the first shot is on us. Just scan the QR code and you'll get your money back for your first shot. You can also use the code HVMNPOD20, that is HVMNPOD20, and get 20% off your first purchase at the HVMN website. This is a super great golden nugget right here, because I've not heard this before, and you can search on YouTube and all that. Like you said, it's lower back, hamstring, quads, hip abductors, hip flexors that are tight, that is impeding my squat. Ankle, this is super interesting because I might actually look into it, because it started with my shoulder injury and then went into my knee injury. And then I realized, the squat position is, I asked my friend to take a video, and that was the butt wink. And when you say a wedge, like sort of put a plate underneath.
Well, I mean, you could always use just Olympic squat shoes, but I like Prime USA, Prime Fitness USA. I think it's PrimeFitnessUSA.com. They have squat wedges. They're like solid steel wedges, so it's an actual angle like this, so there's not that gap where you put a plate. I have most of my guys get those. They have 10 degree, 15 degree, 20, 30, so you can just pick the one that works for you. I like to have most people have two options. That way we just get, when I was talking before about small variations in exercise, that gives you two variations. Like if you go 6 to 8 weeks on a 10 degree wedge, and then we go the next 6 to 8 weeks on a 15 degree wedge. So it's a similar pattern, nothing new to learn. You're not getting super sore because it's something you haven't done before. Just a slight variation, which is enough for a new stimulus. And then it also checks your ego, because you're like, well, I plateaued at 10 degrees. Now it's a new exercise at 15. So I could say, let's cut back 20% and then ramp up again. Because most people just always want to go like linearly up,
Yeah, and I'm so glad you mentioned plateau, because that is my next question for you. So when people hit a plateau, so what I think I watched Jeff Nippert's YouTube video. He was talking about, people wanting to lose weight, they build muscle mass, they decrease calorie, they have the calorie deficit, and then they plateau. And then there is no longer fat loss that comes with any more decrease in calorie. And if you decrease any more, you're going to get malnourished and you're not going to feed the muscles that you have just built. And he advised slowly taking up those calories back and then also increase the progressive load to a point where you can lift that a higher amount of weight or volume, and then do that as a new starting point. Is that the general understanding and advice you would give?
Let me kind of take a step back and explain how I'd approach it from a bigger perspective. So if someone comes to me and they want to lose fat, normally I am going to jack their calories way up at the beginning, and they're gonna be like, "Yo, dude, I'm gonna get even fatter." But a lot of people, generally speaking, have kind of a broken metabolism. You know, it could be a million different things. So, and there's a few reasons for this. So I'm gonna, like most people are like, "Oh, should I be at 8 times body weight, 10 times body weight?" I might take them 18 to 20 times body weight for a week or two. That's going to be way more than they've eaten before. Now they're going to get warmer, their thyroid's going to get cranked up, their metabolism's going to get cranked up, and usually they're not going to gain weight. It's harder to gain weight than a lot of people think. And sometimes people are kind of fat and overweight and they're actually under eating, and that blows their mind too. So I'm like, we got to eat. And people complain and be like, I can't eat this much. The other reason to do that is because now we have this ace up our sleeve where if we start at 10 times body weight, where are we going to go? Okay, you plateau. Now we're at 9. Now we're at 8. Are we going to go to 7? That's a really small amount to eat. And then we're plateaued in 6 to 8 weeks. Now what are you going to do? But if we started at 20, that's an enjoyable process of losing 50 pounds or 30 pounds, because now we got a long way to go, and you're just like you could eat pancakes and get lean. So that's the first thing I do is keep it super high, unless you're like, I got this photo shoot in 6 weeks. So I'm like, bro, you should have thought about that 6 months ago, but let's do the best we can, Then we'll have to go on extreme cuts. So if you have to go on an extreme caloric reduction like you're talking about there, eventually, yes, T3, all these things are going to crash. Thyroid's going to crash. You're going to plateau. Your metabolism's dead in the water. So what do we have to do? You got a couple different options. As way back as in the 50s, Vince Gironda would do this, where Larry Scott was the first Mr. Olympia in 1959. He trained Larry Scott. He trained all kinds of celebrities back then. He would go 3 to 4 days because he knew that in 3 to 4 days your metabolism was crashing. And then he would have a refeed meal. So you just have, pancakes or something like that, like I said. So that's one option. I've used that successfully plenty of times. The other option is you're just totally shot. Your hands and feet are freezing. Your body temperature is 96. You're really shot. Now we do need to do what you said there. We got to refeed. We got to start adding calories back in. So like if you're down to 1,500 calories as a guy, you probably, all right, next week we're going to go to 1,750. How's your weight? Stable, cool. Next week we're going to go to 2,000, then 2,250, whatever. We got to rebuild. Then you're going to start feeling good. Then you actually start losing again. And then we'll just ride that out until we need to start cutting again. So you have to rebuild. In terms of training with that, I kind of take an opposite approach than most people. If you, again, let's say you got 6 weeks, I got to get ripped. So you're like, oh, I'm going to do all the training. Like, no, you can't do all the training. We're going to get most of that from diet and just, optimizing hormones, reducing stress, improving sleep. So we're going to do the same amount of training. And then as we get closer to the peak where calories and carbs are really low, we're going to do less training. So we're going to rest 3 to 4 minutes between sets. I may say, hey, how we were doing 10s last week? Don't go above 6 reps on anything this week, because you're just going to have more cortisol, more adrenaline. You're going to lose muscle. Then you're going to have like that skinny fat look.
Yeah, the cortisol is going to hang on to the fat storage.
Yeah, so it's not going to be a good look. So I actually reduced the volume of everything across the board. Absolutely zero hit, just low intensity cardio, walking 10,000 steps a day, things like that. And then once we come out of that, like I said, once we ramp the calories back up, then we can ramp the training volume back up. But I'm not someone who typically kind of like does cycles of training or manipulates volume up or down. Like I did all those things for 20 years. I don't find it necessary. I find that we find your sweet spot for you, and you can just ride that out. And then when you hit a plateau, we make some changes. But I don't like, making crazy changes.
I think that's with, not just health and fitness, in science as well. I think when it comes to different forms of training and stuff, we get too creative and we try to vary things too much. And then over time, and then you realize, hang on a minute, we can actually streamline a lot of this and make it more efficient rather than coming up with new programs, new training, new nutrition all the time. So when you jack up those calories for these people, like, in the beginning, how long do you put them on? Do you put them on a week, 2 weeks, and then you start cutting down the calories, or how does it work?
It's really individual, but I found like for the majority of people, it takes a while for them to, once you really optimize their metabolism and eat the right foods. Like if you just eat pizza and donuts, yeah, you're going to look horrible. But if you're eating the right foods and optimize your metabolism, Ray Peat talked about like pro-metabolic foods. So if you eat things that are pro-metabolic, it takes a while for you to start gaining weight, and then a lot of times people start losing. Like, and even to this day, as long as I've been doing it, I'll get pictures or feedback from a guy like, that's crazy. Dude's eating 500 grams of carbs a day, and he's still not losing. I mean, he's still not gaining a pound. So let's keep riding that out, because then when we want to start losing weight, you imagine being able to do that on 400 grams of carbs a day. Like, it's going to be really enjoyable.
That's a privilege. That's a huge privilege for a lot of people.
And so many guys that I do this with, and again, it's synergistically with the training and the lifestyle. I've rarely seen anyone that it doesn't work, that they just start gaining weight. It's more that they are like, dude, I've never eaten this many carbs, and I cannot gain a pound. It's crazy.
Yeah, it's coming from a science background and academic background, us looking at, say, animal work and preclinical studies, and looking at diabetes, which was what I did in my PhD, and making rats fat, and it was a very easy equation. You give them like high calorie food, and you make the pancreatic beta cells dysfunctional, and then they'll start being diabetic, and then they gain a lot of weight. But when it comes to humans, and you're like, why can't I just translate this?
Yeah.
And you're like you said, you put 500 grams of carbs a day, and then you're like, why aren't you gaining weight? What's going on? Like the wonders of hormones and the interactions between different enzymes and hormone in the body is so fascinating that it's never a linear process.
Yeah, no, for sure. And what I do that may surprise people nowadays, especially due to the popularity of, higher fat and keto the last decade or whatever, is the majority of the time I will reduce people's fat intake, though, if their goal is, physique optimization, whatever. Because I think we got so carried away there over the last decade where people were like, yeah, put butter in your coffee and, bacon, blend some bacon in your coffee too. It's like, you can't get fat. It's like, no, you can get really fat eating fat.
Hold on, did you just say blend some bacon in the coffee?
I'm just exaggerating.
No, I was going to say, I was like, is that actually a practice now?
No, I hope not. I hope not. But it's actually, contrary to what a lot of people think, it's quite easy to get fat from eating a lot of fat. So
I think a lot of people don't realize that fat contains more than twice the amount of calories than proteins and glucose. So when you put in fat, it's all good, and you can really improve metabolic flexibility and all of that. But if you are taking in an excess of calories anyway, whether it's from fat or sugar or protein, most people can't really get an excess of calories in protein because you actually get full very quickly. But then if you just take too much fat, even if the form of fat that are good for you, it will cause people to gain weight. So we talked about intra-workout recovery. You were saying that you recommend 3 to 4 minutes or even 2 to 3 minutes versus 1 minute, so that people can fully recover and do it in proper form.
Just a quick thing there. I'm not one of these guys who just started like 2 years ago and you just go by the science for everything. There's cases where it doesn't make sense to rest 3 minutes. Like at the end of a workout, if you're going to do calves and abs, I might say do a set of calves, rest 30 seconds, do a set of abs, rest 30 seconds. Like if you
big compound movements.
Yeah.
That's a great clarification because I'm actually doing that right now for big compound movements like bench and squats. I can do 3-4 minutes, but then when I'm doing isolated workouts like say side lats, lateral raises, 1 minute is more than enough. Doing abs, 1 minute is more than enough. Let's talk about inter-workout recovery. What sort of recovery period is sufficient and recommended between workout sessions? Like 1 day, 2 days. Like I know it probably varies from individual to individual, but what's your guideline for
Yeah,
it.
I mean, again, there's, if you look at, you can look at studies and real world experience and make arguments for everything. You could say, oh, muscles recovered in 48 hours. Muscle protein synthesis peaks at, depending on what you're reading, 36 hours, 48 hours. It's dead in the water by 72 hours. You have to train a muscle that frequently. And then those same people would tell you, oh, if you take a week off from training, you don't lose any gains. But then you're like, yeah, but I thought if I waited more than 72 hours, I was going to lose gains, So it's like they contradict themselves. Having done this so long, and read all the studies and also have the real world experience, I would say, unfortunately, it is individual. There's not like a just cookie cutter answer I can give you. It is individual. I do find that as you get strong, so what I would do is, here's a general answer. The weaker you are, the newer to your lifting you are, the more frequency you should have. Again, it's practice. You're trying to get better. So train more frequently. You could train every other day. And quite frankly, I think you can train every day. You can train full body every day. I've trained full body every day, even being advanced. And the only thing that happens is my joints, like I get tight, I get like tendon issues, but I recover. Like I could actually train chest and back and legs super hard today, do it tomorrow, and go up in weight, be stronger. But by the end of the week, every tendon's like, oh God, I got so much inflammation that it's just not worth it. So I would say train as often as you can. That your recovery ability allows. Everybody's different. Everybody repairs, tendons, muscles different at a different rate. And it depends on so many factors. What's your technique like? What exercises are you doing? Like, if you're doing a barbell back squat or you're doing a pendulum squat, the recovery is going to be different. There's so much difference about the stimulus. So it depends on so many factors.
Let me rephrase the question here. So, I understand the logic and the rationale that you just answered. What should people be looking out for when they are recovering? Is it, like you said, you mentioned the tendon being tight and inflamed, and that feeling, that tightness, even though you work on chest 2 days ago and it's still tight, you're not fully recovered to do a heavy chest day again. What kind of things can people look out for? Just a little takeaway for our audience.
Yeah, I mean, that's it right there. Soreness is not a good indicator. So if your chest is still sore, you can train. If your tendons and your shoulders and your joints and your elbows are jacked up, then you shouldn't train. So that's just something to be aware of. And mild soreness. If you're really like a deep soreness, then don't train. Now, you should be training in a way that you rarely get that really deep soreness. If you're always getting that, maybe you're doing too much stretch position stuff, like too many flies and RDLs and things like that. Or maybe there's just something off about your training. You're just doing too much volume in one session. So you should always have, in my opinion, little to no soreness, like minimal soreness. And then how are your overall energy levels? Like if you wear an Oura ring or something and track it, how's your recovery score every day? So that's not, muscle specific, but it's like just telling you that your training is either good or it's too much. So if you're waking up every day at 65 to 70, maybe you're overtraining every day. You may not be overtraining a specific muscle, it's just too much weekly volume, right? And then back to the original question about the muscle, I would say, for most people, most of the time, training something twice a week is pretty fail-proof. As you get older and more advanced and you're really strong, that may become once every 4 to 5 days, and as much as once every 7 days for certain people. And then again, we go back to the joy factor. If you've been training for 30 years, sometimes you don't want to train anything more than once a week. There's like the excitement. Like for me, if I had to do full body, I wouldn't be happy. I could do it for a few weeks, and I'll be bored. Like I've been training 30 years, so I like to train things every, let's say, 4 to 6 days,
Yeah, great. I mean, that's another great point. Like just because your muscle managed to recover within X amount of time doesn't mean that your body will also recover within that amount of time, because your body may still going through the stress period and you might still have an upregulation of stress hormones that could potentially lead to a lack of focus, lack of, and lack of motivation, mood, microbiome, and all of that stuff, health stuff as well.
And that's when you get injured on those days where all those things that you just said are going on. That's when you get injured. Yeah.
Exactly. And for women as well, like I interviewed 2 ex-bodybuilders from Alignment Athletics. They overtrained when they were, they look great, but because the constant stress that they're putting their bodies through with the hormonal change of the women body, they just broke down. So they learned from that, and then now they are out there like spreading the knowledge and information to other women who are training very rigorously.
That's an important point is the hormonal changes. Like, yeah, you may be able to handle that mentally, all that training a week, but is your testosterone plummeting from that? And then that's not great, which a lot of high level bodybuilders, they have very low testosterone because they're just training way too much.
So let's switch gear a little bit and, switch from training to nutrition. In terms of nutrition, what sort of structure do you normally, I know you mentioned a little bit earlier in terms of calories, how you would structure it for your clients. Would you just go for a standard cookie cutter, or do you see person per person? Would you recommend high fat, sort of keto diet, or just a standard American diet, but looking at the quality of the food versus the proportion as well?
I like quality first and foremost. So, pretty much paleo as the base, and then most of my guys will eat white rice if they can tolerate it. So I'm big on digestion. I'm big on food quality. So I want to get things that are easy to digest. So paleo, white rice, and then generally I'll have a gram per pound of body weight. I'll go 0.3 to 0.4 times body weight for fat, up to 0.5. Whereas a lot of my guys come in, they're at like a gram or more. And I'm like, no, we got to reduce this. Now, eventually we may raise that up because some people do feel better. If you're interested in joint health, cognitive function, long-term, just feeling better, some people definitely feel better with higher fat, but then we got to bring the carbs down. But I just like to optimize higher fat is not going to skyrocket your thyroid and your metabolism, which is what we want at first. My guys are generally coming in for physique transformation. More, of course, there's always going to be that focus on long-term health and longevity, but at first we want to get quick wins, right? Like, I want to look better in 90 days. So I'm going to go higher carb, lower fat. So a gram of protein per pound, 0.3 to 0.4 on fat, and then carbs, that's just going to be me looking at the person depending on how much fat they have to lose, where they store it. I'll go anywhere from a gram per pound, let's say starting at a gram per pound average. I might go a gram and a half. I might go 0.75. So it's anywhere between 0.75 to 1.5 times their body weight. And then again, that may tweak based on what they look like and based on their history. Like, what have you been doing for the previous 12 weeks or 12 months? But that's generally the starting point. So super healthy food quality. Those are the numbers. And then I like 3 to 4 evenly spaced meals. Because most of my guys tend to be type A too, so I don't want them intermittent fasting. They're already just chugging coffee all day. They're stressed out of their mind. They're adrenaline, cortisol, driven, catecholamines. Like, it's all a disaster, right? So I'm like, let's get you eating, and then within a week they feel better. And also because I want to boost their metabolism, I don't think that intermittent fasting is the best thing for that. If they're already coming in with a low body temperature and T3 and all that's crashed, I like eating more often. So I'd basically take those numbers I just gave you, divide it by 4. Like, for example, myself, I'll eat at 7, 11, 2, and 6. Like, that's how I eat every day. Now, I will have more calories at dinner just from a social perspective. I enjoy that, and I enjoy not having to eat as much during the day. Your energy's better, your digestion's better, your cognitive function's better. So that's what I do, and that's what most of my guys tend towards. I keep it easy and say, let's divide it by 4, but eventually we'll push more calories at dinner for all those reasons.
Got it. So would it make any difference if you push more calories towards dinner versus lunch early in the day? So people sort of use it, and versus, if they're going to bed soon?
Not from a physique perspective, but I do like to have 3 hours between the time you finish eating dinner and bedtime. 2 minimum. If you don't, then your sleep's going to be disrupted. So all the anti-inflammation processes and all those, I think, are going to slow down. Your recovery is going to be worse. You may wake up in the middle of the night. So I like that ideally. And then everyone's individual. How much? If you eat a humongous meal at night, especially if it's too close to bed, like, your sleep quality is and it's going to show on your score the next day.
So in terms of supplements, what are the supplements that are tested and proven to give good results that you would recommend?
Very minimal in terms of like physique transformation. If we're talking about that, creatine's almost the only thing really, I like to keep it simple. Like, let's clean up the diet, let's get the sleep optimized, let's get the training optimized, and then you want to add something. Okay, protein, but if there's nothing different about a protein shake than a steak. It's just convenience, or if you have a sweet tooth, which I get. So maybe a protein shake, creatine. Um,
What do you think of L-carnitine?
very little. I don't do anything with it. In terms of an intra, um, especially a guy who's struggling to gain muscle, I might throw some cyclic dextrin in there. It's a high molecular weight, low molecular weight carb, which is easy to digest, and I'll put that in there with some pomegranate juice, and
BCAA?
I'll throw essential aminos in there instead of branch chains. I think they're more effective. So 6 to 10 grams, depending on the person, their body weight. So 6 to 10 grams of essential aminos. You can throw the creatine right in there. It doesn't matter timing with creatine. Cyclic dextrin and some pomegranate juice. And if you take that, before, and I would throw some salt in there, some sodium. So you could throw, whatever electrolytes or just straight up sea salt in there. You'll get a great pump doing that. And here's the funny thing, like we don't know, science doesn't know if a pump contributes to muscle growth or not. Real world experience says there's probably something going on there. And I could make a lot of different arguments. I will also argue that getting a pump is safer. And so for me, my training is like longevity and health and safe. Like I want it to be safe. So if you just go in, you don't worry about getting a pump. You do all sets of 5 with 8 minutes rest in between, and you never get a pump. It's not going to feel that good. I want you to get a really good pump, and then at the bottom of a press, we're actually rebounding off of pumped muscles, right? Everything's pumped up. Your lats are pumped, your chest is pumped. At the bottom of a squat, you're rebounding off of your pumped up hamstrings and quads and glutes. Your knees and quads are going to feel so much better. So I like to do things that are going to elicit a greater pump, which is why, like, even for my guys, even if they don't have, I'll use low dose Cialis for pump. Like, so I'll have them take that on the days they train, like 2.5 to 5 milligrams. There's other science behind Cialis in terms of like heart health and brain health and things like that. Longevity has been studied for things like that. But I think it's a really good thing for longevity. But in terms of the pump, like you take it that day and you do that stack, that intra that I told you, your pump's going to be better, your joints are going to feel better, your workout's going to be better.
And also mentally as well, you're looking at visual motivation when you look at yourself in the mirror. I mean, there's no shortage of mirrors in the gyms. So you are actually seeing the results of your hard work. And obviously that will propel you to go further next time.
And you know what else happens too? And these are all things that will never be studied. There'll never be any science behind this. It's just like real world experience, right? Like if you get a better pump, it's easier to have better form. Like if I take someone and be like, hey, do you feel that? No. Okay, let's do 8 more sets of it. Okay, now I can feel my lat. All right, now do what I was telling you. Now drive down like this. Oh yeah, now I get. So anything we do to get a better pump, your training's gonna be safer and you're gonna develop a better connection. Now your technique improves.
So when we're talking about mindset and mentality and confidence, this is a chicken and egg situation I want to ask you, right? Does mindset and confidence come first, or does habit come first? So do you have to build a habit in order to build a mindset and confidence, or do you have to have that mindset and confidence in order to build a habit?
No, you have to have not even so much a habit. For sure, you definitely have to build habits, but you just have to have the evidence that you've done the thing, and then you're like, okay, I did the thing, now I have confidence. So I always say act your way into thinking differently. I don't know where I first read that or heard that. It was many, many years ago. But I always say that act your way into thinking differently. And it served me really well. And clients that I work with and when I go speak places, I talk about that. Because we all, I think, consume too much information, listen to podcasts, read books. And a lot of people don't implement, though. It's like, well, I read all these books, but did I actually make more money? Okay, no. Then what? Did I actually get more confident? Am I different? Are my relationships different? Am I approaching the world differently? No. So then I've had a lot of clients where I'm like, dude, stop reading. And they're like, no, but I have to. I go, okay, here's what you're gonna do. No reading and no podcasts for a month and just see what happens. My thing is just doing the thing. Act your way. I always tell people, write down, take 10 minutes, 20 minutes, whatever it is, get a blank notebook out, write down the qualities of someone that you admire, like the man or woman that you would look up to, that you want to be. What are those qualities? And don't list a million because then it's unrealistic, but maybe it's 5 things, like the top 5 qualities. And do you embody these? Okay, no. So now how does that person act? How does that person enter a room? How does that person address people? How does that person make people feel? What are the habits that person does each day? What time does that person get up? What time do they go to bed? Does that person skip their workout or no? Does that person stick to their diet? Does that person light up a room? Does that person push through their comfort zone? Do they make strangers feel special? Whatever it is. And then just start doing it. Don't be like, well, I need to read a book on how to do those things. No, you don't. You have an example of that person. There's plenty of people that are doing that, so just start doing it. And that I find is actually way easier than reading a book and prepping, because everyone's always reading a book and prepping for the perfect time or something, you know?
Yeah, I know. It's like I mean, I can definitely relate to that coming from an academic background. After all these degrees, I, when people like recently, my team and all that, they're like, oh yeah, you can do, go do content, and you already do podcasts, you can do more other social media content. But I'm like, I didn't get a degree in this. Like, I would love to do more content, but I feel like I'm lost. I need some structured class or something, or some guidance where to start. But then most social content creators, they just do. They just pour out, all these contents and just try and see what sticks. And my approach is like, it's more of a structured learning approach. And I think when it comes to fitness, as you said, it's basically just go out there and do, and especially knowing people, whether you know them personally or you don't, but knowing their habits and their lifestyle choices, and then implementing it for yourself and see what works for yourself. I think that is a really good advice.
Yeah, yeah. I think most people just learn better by doing, right? Like, just do the thing. And of course, yeah, read, but like, start doing today and then read. Read to figure out like how to improve it. Like, if I wanted to learn how to build a roof, I could read a book about building, or I could just go work with Jim the roofer for a week. Like, oh, this is how you do it,
So how would you recommend your client or our audience to stay disciplined and motivated? Because undoubtedly, everyone would have that dip after, half a year, after a few weeks. We'll have a bad day at work, and then we feel demotivated. We don't go to the gym one day, and then that leads to 2 days, that leads to a week. How would you advise people to stay disciplined and motivated?
Kobe Bryant said the most important thing you can do is inspire others so that they can be great. So if everything is about you, how fit can you be, how smart can you be, how much money can you make, you'll always default, you'll always crash, you'll always, like, if you're internally focused instead of externally focused, you will be unhappy. Dr. King said those who are happiest are those who do the most for others. So like, it sounds kind of crazy, but if you go to the gym not just for you, but for everyone around you who's struggling, because everyone's struggling, everyone's suffering, everyone has insecurity, anxiety, depression, baggage, history, whatever. But if you go to the gym and keep that in mind, like, oh, maybe I'm going to inspire my wife, my dad, and my friend, and my coworkers, because they see that I never miss. And everyone who goes out, like, there's the office party and everyone eats cake, but you don't eat cake. And then every Friday night, everyone's out drinking a dozen beers, but you don't. You're now inspiring everybody. You're that kind of Kobe Bryant of your own crew. So again, it's like, if I just went to the gym for myself or anyone, I think eventually it was just like, oh, I'm not going anymore. I'm not getting, like, I don't look like The Rock. I'm going to stop going, like, but if you take that mindset of for everything you do, like, if you can inspire other people, because I think, so many people are like, well, what's my purpose? I don't know my purpose. I don't know my mission. But like, I like that quote that Kobe had. And Dr. King said, anybody can be great because anybody can serve. Serving doesn't necessarily mean you're going to a soup kitchen or you're going to a third world country or whatever. Like, just serve by being an inspiration, someone that people can look up to, admire, and be like, I love how that's doing that. I'm going to do that. Like, I like how that guy does that. I'm going to start doing that. So I think if you reframe it that way, because I could be like, well, just, be more disciplined and set your watch a half hour earlier to get up in the morning and like this and that. I was like, yeah, but I mean, also, what we went back to earlier, pick the kind of training style that you enjoy too. Because if someone told you, like, the only way you're going to get results is if you do full body and keto, and you love eating carbs and doing a body part split, then eat carbs and do a body part split. Even if God himself came down and said that's the best way to do it, do your thing, but do it smart. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. And I love it. I love this part of your advice, and genuinely really appreciate it, and really I can really relate it, because I have friends who come up to me as like, hey, I did like 3-hour like cardio today because you inspired me, and I'm like, I don't even do cardio myself, don't do enough, but that inspired them to push themselves because they see me pushing myself. And then it goes two ways, right? Because then I see them pushing themselves on the days that I feel I'm really lazy and really demotivated. I'm like, what would Brian do? What would Matt do? What would John do? Like these people are pushing themselves because they see me. So it's my turn to push myself because I see them.
I think that's what's great about it is you choose to become a leader for those around you. And leadership is a choice anyway. It's not a gift or something you're born with. And there's so many different ways, but you're leading them in that way to get healthier.
Yeah, and then at the end of the day, it's consistency. Consistency is key. Whatever that you do, you have to enjoy. And you said it many times in this hour that is the main point. If you're not doing something that you enjoy, eventually you will drop off and you won't have the motivation. You can only push yourself so much towards something that you hate, even if it's giving you results. So lastly, for our audience who would like to find you, where can they find you? Where can they find your training programs or all the information that you would like to share with them?
Yeah, just go to j.fit. It's right there. You go there. That's the easiest way to get a hold of me. And on Instagram, I'm at jferrugia, and the podcast is the Renegade Strength Show.
There you go. So check Jason out, and a lot of knowledge being shared today. I've learned so much. Thank you so much. And hopefully we'll meet in person next time I come to Miami.